Good morning, 5th grade students. This is your lesson video that's going along with Kumon 23 and 24. And this is your independent practice for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm probably going to do this in a couple of different videos. All right, so we're going to start. Normally we start with kind of a warm-up with a dry erase practice, and you're really going to need it for this one because our standard today we're working on is I can convert decimals and fractions to percents and percents to decimals and fractions. And the key skill for this one, the skill right before it, is knowing how to multiply by powers of 10 and divide by powers of 10. And it's great that we're doing this lesson this week because next week this skill is going to be applied to our measurement learning and metric measurement, which is a 5th grade standard. So by working on your algebra this week, you're really going to give yourself a heads up. So we're going to start. We don't have dry erase boards, but if you can get out a piece of paper, and you don't need to copy down the problems if you can just write the answers with me. And I'm going to do a couple on my own, and then I'm going to ask you to pause, or I'll pause, and you can do a few on your own practice. Because if we don't get this skill of multiplying and dividing by powers of 10 really cemented in our brains, it's going to be really hard to move back and forth between percents. And again, I know we've talked about, but this is a skill that you're going to use out in the real world in your head, because you're not going to pull your calculator out every time you're at a restaurant and you need to do your tip, or if you're at a store and you want to know if the sale is really a good sale. You're going to do all this in your head. So this is a skill you're going to use all the time. All right, so when I ask you, what was our trick when we're multiplying whole numbers by powers of 10? So our trick was that we count the zeros and we just add. So 4 times 1 is 4, add a 0. So what would 4 times 100 be? 4 times 1 is 4, add 2 zeros. What would 4 times 1,000 be? 4 times 1 is 4, add 3 zeros. Okay, so we started that at the beginning of the year. That's a trick you learn in 4th grade. But in 5th grade, we started moving a little bit further, because what happens if you already have a 0? Do you remember what you have to do if you already have a 0 in one of your factors? Yeah, you have to count the zeros in both of your factors. So 4 times 1 is 4, but this time we're going to add how many zeros? 2, because we have a 0 here and a 0 here. 4 times 1 is 4. This time, how many zeros are we going to add? 3. 4 times 1 is, now how many zeros are we going to add? 4. Okay, so our rule was add zeros. And our rule here was add zeros, make sure you add them for both factors. Okay, now these were whole numbers, so this was probably 4 to 1. And now we're on to quarter 2. We were working with multiplying with decimals. So if you have a decimal and you're multiplying, which direction does the decimal move? Now, hopefully you said you want your number to get bigger, so your decimal is going to move right. And do you remember how you determine how many place values your decimal moves? It moves for the number of zeros. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and write it here. If I was multiplying by 10, my decimal needs to move 1 place to the right. Now if I'm multiplying by 100, how many places to the right is it going to move? 2. 1, 2. Okay, now if my decimal moved here, how would I write this number? 40, because I would need to add a 0 right there. All right, what about this one? Times 1,000. How many times is your decimal going to move on this one? 1, 2, 3. So if my decimal moved here, how many placeholders do I need to have? Because I moved it. All right, so this strategy was move the decimal right to multiply. All right, so let's try some harder ones. Again, you don't need to write all these out. You're just writing out the answers on a scratch piece of paper. Just pretend your scratch piece of paper is like a whiteboard. All right, so now we have 0.04. If I was multiplying it by 10, what direction is my decimal going to move? I'm multiplying. To the right. And how many places is it going to move? 1. For 1, 0. So my new number is 0.4. All right, let's try this one. This time we're multiplying it by 100. How many places is my decimal going to move? 2. 1, 2. So my new number is 4. All right, now this is the tough one. Oops. This time I'm multiplying it by 1,000. So how many times is my decimal going to move? 1, 2, 3. So how would I write my new number? All right, so that's our multiplying. We move our number, our decimal, to the right, or you add zeros, or both. Okay, so what about division? So this was 4th grade. How do you divide by powers of 10? So when we multiply by powers of 10, think what we did. Now what about when we divide by powers of 10? All right, so you take away a 0. All right, so in this one, how many zeros are we going to take away? 1. In this one, how many zeros are we going to take away? 2. And this one, how many zeros are we taking away? 2. Now I want you to jump down here, and I want to show you that our trick of taking away the zeros is the same thing as moving the decimal. So if we were dividing by 10, to multiply by powers of 10, we move the decimal right. But to divide by powers of 10, we move the decimal left. But where is the decimal hiding in a whole number? behind the decimal, behind the number. All right, so we're going to pretend our decimal was here, because it was just hiding. And we're going to divide by 10, which means we're going to move our decimal one place to the left. Notice that we got the same answer when we just took away a 0. So let's try another one. Where is the decimal hiding? Behind the number. This time when we go left, how many place values are we moving the decimal? 2. Divide by 10. Divide by 100. Just like using our trick up here. So the trick works because we are dividing the number by one place value. Every place value is the power of 10. All right, so now that we know, we're really just sliding the decimals. I know we've gone over this before, but it's always good to review. So if we're going to divide 400 by 10, we'd move the decimal left for division. We're getting smaller. And we're going to move it how many place values? 1. If we're dividing by 100, we're going to move it how many place values? 2. And if we divide it by 1,000, we're going to move it how many place values? And this is the tough one. 1, 2, 3. Look where my place value ended up, my decimal ended up. All right, so let's keep practicing. Where's the decimal hiding? I'm going to put it behind our number so we know it's there. And I want you to do these real quick on your own. Divide by 10. Divide by 100. Divide by 1,000. Now what if the decimal was actually in front of the number? We're starting with something that's already in a decimal form. It's the same rule. You're going to move the decimal left and add your zeros. Divide by 10. Divide by 100. Divide by 1,000. Be careful, you gotta make sure you get all your zeros in there. And looking at our last one, it is the same thing. You're just going to slide the decimal point over 1. Slide it over twice. And slide it over 3 times. All right. So now that we kind of have a little bit of background knowledge, and I've kind of brought you back up where you were a few months ago on this skill, we're going to open up our packet, and I'm going to stop the video and start a new one. And we're going to be working on Kumon Lesson 23. So if you can have your packet ready for the next video, I'll see you in a minute.